Yes, I can see about 70% of the responses in. I will just give it a few more seconds to see how, yeah, are you a farm manager, farm owner? If you're other, I didn't have another box, but you could also type on the chat box and tell us maybe you're not in any of these category and you belong in another category. Okay, I can see we at 80%. I will give it 10 more seconds. With 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, and I will now end the poll. So let me share the results. So you can see 60% of the participants are service providers with a small number in NGO and inputs, and then government. And so they're interesting, no farm managers. Farm owners are only 7%, and no farm managers. So again, that came as a bit of a surprise. Yeah, but I can see now the questions are coming in from, I think some of those are for Dr. Fabio. So the first question comes from Arnold Kerina. Arnold is asking, hello, how do you obtain the potential yield for the crop? So Fabio, would you like to comment on that? And then as you could prepare the answer for that. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Arnold, for the question. You know, satellites have a number of information also from the past. From the time they've been launched, it is possible to monitor the crop also in the previous years. And so you have a lot of information, and out of these previous values, you can get averages, or you can calculate various functions and models relevant to the previous years. That model is calculated from a function which is called cycloid, which basically looks for the best performance of the previous years, how that curve could shape up in the case basically when you don't have locusts, you don't have drought, you don't have too many weeds, you don't have any adversity of the crop. This is a model, an ideal model generated from the previous data. At this point, you can compare the real data in the season currently with the ideal model generated from previous data. The best fields usually have very high curves, ideal curves, whereas the poor fields with low level of fertilities have low curves. And at this point, you can easily take the comparison.
Thank you, Fabio. For the next question, it comes from Mohammed Diabakate. Mohammed, I'll actually allow you to talk if you're able, and then you can actually ask your question directly. Mohammed? Okay, seems to be having a bit of trouble. Yeah, Mohammed, you need to unmute yourself so that you
Yes,
can...
I was mute. So thank you. I was wondering, where you derive your data from? Do you use Copernicus data, satellite programs?
So I can answer for Lentera, and then Fabio, you can answer for for Airbus. So yes, so as Lentera, we use both Copernicus data and some Airbus data as well. So the different satellite, but yeah, largely the Copernicus Sentinel-2 constellation. Fabio, would you like to answer as well?
Yes, my answer is very similar to yours because I use Sentinel-2 data, which is a part of the Copernicus Sentinel constellation under a European program, but I also use MODIS. MODIS is not part of Copernicus, is not a European satellite, it is an American satellite, because as I said, I have to integrate also the thermal information, I mean the temperature. So if you want to put it this way, the vegetation information comes from Europe and the temperature comes from America, just to put it in a very funny way. But what I'm saying is not only Copernicus, there's also a NASA component.
Does this data available open source?
No, the data, the satellite data are definitely open source, yes, but the VHI is the result of a strong processing of the original raw satellite data. So you have basically the inputs, which are free, open source, already paid by the big institutions like NASA, like Europe, etc. But then the process on them is actually the added value which the companies in Europe usually apply to that to eventually generate a certain added value index, like the VHI, for example. So the data, the VHI itself is not open source.
It's derived data which is open source, but you computing part which transforms from open source to this index.
Oh yes, the to transform the open source data, original data from the satellite down to the VHI, it is an extremely complex process. I can point you to a scientific publication which was supposed to go in the press in March, but unfortunately it was not possible because of the COVID, because of the pandemic. But anyway, if you are interested, I can share with you a scientific paper which explains you the principles of the VHI, and so you can understand actually what are the logical steps bringing you from the satellite data down to the final result, the VHI.
I'll be glad.
Can you please share with me your email address?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
That's
Good,
okay.
and then
Yeah.
I reply to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
For the VHI, let's say I have two fields where I want to use it, but unfortunately, no base data for this. But can I draw blue curve?
Sorry, didn't quite catch you. Can you draw what?
The blue curve without data. Is it necessary?
The blue curve.
Yes, this is necessary to have the data from the harvest, but to draw the blue curve.
Well, usually the blue curve and the orange curve come always in parallel, okay? So if you click on one of your Shamba, you can get always the two curves together.
Okay.
So usually when you have the blue curve, you always have also the orange curve. They come together.
Okay. Okay, so it's a model for the blue model. It's not only because I had from the past 10 years 10 tons of weight, and this year I have only 7. So the blue doesn't rely on that.
Sorry, Mohammed, you seem to be breaking up slightly. We couldn't hear your question clearly. Could you maybe type it on the chat box? And
Yes.
then as you're typing, we can now move to Amos Wanyiri. Amos, I will give you an opportunity to ask your question. So you would need to unmute yourself. Amos, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. My question is on just to understand from experience of the experts, what is the balance of using high definition, maybe satellite imagery? In my case, I have been using this model supporting coffee smallholder farmers, but of course it's a donor-funded program, which means beyond the donor funding, I don't know whether farmers can afford the service because it's a high definition. And so just to understand in your experience, how have you been using, I mean, having a balance between having high definition satellite imagery and low, and how has it been working, particularly in the context of smallholder farmers?